What's up guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched, and this week we're taking a look at the lessons that I've learned about studying psychology as a psychology lecturer and tutor. Now, for a couple of years during my psychology doctorate, I actually worked part-time as a seminar tutor and a lecturer in psychology, and there was a number of different things I learned about what it meant to be studying psychology, what made students successful in their psychology studies and what made them fail. Now, like many of you, I've obviously done a psychology degree, I've done a psychology doctorate, but my undergraduate, you kind of learn a couple of lessons about what makes a successful student, what doesn't, but I learned so much as a lecturer and a tutor about what makes a psychology student successful and what makes them unsuccessful. So, this week we're taking a look at the lessons I learned about studying psychology as a psychology lecturer and tutor. Now, during the course of this video, I'm going to give you a couple of key points about things you need to consider as a psychology student from my perspective during my time as a lecturer and a tutor. And at the very end, I'm going to give you a little bit of a synopsis about 4 key points that make psychology students fail in their modules or even in their degree from my perspective during my time as a psychology lecturer and tutor. But my first point to consider is that students that are successful in their psychology studies are the students that start their work early. Now, whenever I was doing my seminars or whenever I was doing my lectures, I would always enter and introduce myself in the first week, and I would always say the same thing to every class. And it was that they were in a beneficial position because they were in the present moment. They were in week 1 of their studies. They didn't have to think too much about exams, they didn't have to think too much about their assignments, or at least that's what they thought. Week 1 is a really beneficial time because you're starting at the very beginning. You have 12 weeks, 13, 14 maybe weeks ahead of you of work. The one thing you don't want to do is get to week 10 or week 11 and think, oh my goodness, I've not been reading on the essential reading list, I've not been working on my assignments, I've not been prepping for my exams. You really don't want to get to that point. So I say to students every single time, make sure that you start your work early. So in week 1, week 2, you should be starting your assignments that are maybe due in week 10. You should also be starting to consider a little bit about exams, which are often around week 12, week 13. You should be thinking about that in week 1 and 2. And you should also be ensuring that you're engaging with your essential reading list in week 1 and week 2. Really hitting the ground running. These are the students that pass. The ones that fail, the ones that struggle with their studies in psychology, at least from my experiences, when I've been marking these assignments and in exams, and I've actually been taking these classes, is the ones that struggle are the ones that start later. And when I say later, I don't necessarily just mean week 10, week 11, I mean week 5, week 6. That's late to be starting really engaging with your work in psychology. So make sure to start early. My next point from my experiences as a psychology lecturer and tutor are the students that do well in their psychology studies are the ones that actually engage with the essential reading and the additional reading as well. It's not all just about the essential reading list that often universities provide you with or psychology courses provide you with. The students that actually engage with the literature. Now, what do I mean by engaging with the literature? Well, basically what I mean is you're fully immersed in the literature. You're not just reviewing what other people have said. So it's really easy to read a paper and just write down or note what that person said, what that academic mentioned in their paper, what they found or what they didn't find. It's another thing entirely to look at that paper and look at other papers in the field as well and come to your own understanding, your own synopsis of that topic. That's real engagement with the literature. And we often talk about critical analysis in psychology studies. You can only do that when you're fully engaged with the academic literature that's present. You can't critically analyze something that you've just reviewed. I've read one paper about eating disorders, for example, and this is what the person said. You can't really critically analyze that. You have to be fully immersed in the literature. So making sure that you have a wide and comprehensive range of reading materials that you're absorbing on a regular basis, and also coming up with your own theories, coming up with your own understandings of the topic. I remember having many class discussions with students when I was a lecturer and a tutor, and I could tell the students that had just read a paper. And I could tell the students who had actually read a full body of work around that area and come up with their own understanding. There's a real difference, and it's actually one of the points we're going to cover later on about how you actually come across in class as being very, very important to the development of your studies in psychology. So making sure that you're fully engaged with the literature is a really, really important point. One of the other key things that I learned as a psychology lecturer and tutor that I think is beneficial for those of you studying psychology comes with regards to your assignments. I can forgive poor referencing. I can forgive poor sentence structure. Listen, I fall victim to those things as well. What I can't forgive in assignments though is somebody who just lists theories or lists findings. Now it kind of goes into the critical analysis of the topic that we talked about in my previous point. But actually just going into your assignments and just writing down what other people have found or what other people have studied or the theories that are applicable to the topic that you're writing about, for me is just boring to read. When I had assignments like that, I'm a human being, even as a marker and even as a lecturer and a tutor, I'm still a human being and I get bored. And if your assignment is boring to the point where you're just listing theories for the sake of it, it's less likely you're going to get a good mark out of that. Thinking a little bit about constructing your own theories and your own understandings and drawing on the understandings and the findings of other people is far more interesting. I don't want to hear more just about the basic theories and listed in those assignments, and there's plenty of students that do that. Try and avoid that at all costs. My next point is kind of connected to that, and what I would say of my experiences of lecturing and tutoring in psychology for students that succeed in their psychology studies is don't just go into your assignments and list as many references as possible. One of the questions I often get asked at the start, or have been asked at the start of assignments for psychology students, is how many references should I have? And I say the same thing to everybody. I say you can have a 5,000 word assessment and have 120 references on that and do far, far worse than somebody who has a 5,000 word assessment and has 15 references. The quality of your references is important. Yeah, the number of references to a degree is important, but don't just file and pile references into an assessment for the sake of it. Also, when you do that, you're more likely to use that word count, and it means you're just reviewing, like we talked about critical analysis, it means you're just reviewing those references and you're just reviewing those theories, and that's not what we want. Utilizing fewer references, but having a more robust argument, a more subjective argument, an understanding of the theory of your own accord and how you have seen the literature, which might mean fewer references, is going to be better than an assessment that has a bunch of references but really hasn't delved into what the arguments actually are or constructed their own arguments. So be cautious about the number of references, the quality of references, and actually what you're doing with those references in an assignment. My next key point from my experiences lecturing and tutoring psychology students is that one of the key ways in which you improve or you do well in your studies is by getting involved in class discussions. Now, one of the things that I've experienced when I've been teaching psychology students is that sometimes people think, or students think, that class discussions in psychology come secondary to everything else. So actually you can just turn up to class if you want, now and again, which some students do, and not engage in the classwork. That seems to be like a way of coasting through your degree. What I would say to that, and what I recognize as a lecturer and a tutor in psychology, is that's something that you can't get away with. Lecturers know that, they recognize that. Tutors recognize when students are not engaging in their work. And first of all, it's actually not beneficial for your learning. It's not that beneficial for when you're coming to write an assignment or writing an exam. You've missed out on class discussions, or you've not influenced class discussions, you've not taken part in class discussions. Your learning suffers as a result. So ultimately it's not going to do much good for you, but it's also going to create an impression from your tutor, who is also often your marker. And that is something to keep in mind as well. The thing with psychology, and this is the same with many other degrees of course, is that over the 4 years of your undergrad, you are kind of with the same students and you get to know the tutors. You want to build a good reputation. And I mean that not because people pass students that they like, or tutors pass the students that they like. That's not the case, of course. You have to do the work well. But you also don't want to create bad impressions. Get involved in class discussions. Give yourself a bit of a reputation for somebody who is willing to be involved, who is engaged with the literature, who's willing to understand theories, come up with their own understandings of psychological perspectives. Getting involved in class discussions is going to be beneficial for your learning. My next point sounds a little bit kind of niche and nuanced, but it's something that I thought, what are some of the things that I really did learn as a psychology lecturer and tutor when it came to what makes psychology students successful and what doesn't. And one of the things is about presentation skills. And I think this is really important to understand. Presenting psychological material or presenting a topic in psychology is always going to be part of somebody's psychology undergrad. And actually just basic presentation skills can be incredibly beneficial For your mark in that presentation, which often can be assessed as part of your criteria for marking, people often have to do presentations. Basic presentation skills and improvements in presentation skills are really, really important. So things like not reading off slides, things like having a reference list attached to your presentation, things like having handouts to your presentation, or making eye contact with the audience and speaking clearly and slowly enough that the content can be absorbed, and having effective slides. All of these kind of things are really important with presentations. Now, I brought this up because I've not really often seen students present effectively. I personally enjoy presenting. It's something that is a part of my work. I enjoy doing it. So maybe I'm being a little bit unfair to some of those students. But if your presentation skills are on point, you're going to do well in these kind of presentation assignments. So maybe it's just something for you to keep in mind. My last key point in my experience as a psychology lecturer and a psychology tutor, and even kind of also as a psychology student, is to not get caught up in what other people are saying and doing. It's a stressful time. Studying in any realm is stressful, but studying psychology can be particularly stressful, of course. It's you're in university, there's a lot of expectation, you've maybe sacrificed quite a lot to be there. It's a long journey before you're qualified and you graduate. You have to kind of be confident in your own abilities. And often what can happen is people get very nervous, very anxious, very panicky about what other people are saying and doing in their course. You know, somebody's studying this topic, oh, why am I not doing that? Or somebody's writing in this way, oh, why am I not doing that? Or I haven't studied that question for this exam. You have to be very, very cautious of that because you can easily get caught up in this whirlwind of anxiety. It's important to be engaged with other students and to kind of connect with other students and help, and get help from other students. But what's really, really important is that you kind of stay on track for yourself and not get too caught up in what other people are doing. Making sure that you're thinking about the points I've mentioned in this video and also just staying focused on your own work. That's really, really important. I want to end this video with 4 key points as to why psychology students fail modules and fail their degrees in psychology, from my perspectives as a psychology lecturer and tutor. Now, I've marked assessments and exams and have failed students. And it doesn't just come out of nowhere. There are 4 key things that I thought, these are the 4 main points as to why psychology students fail anything actually in their degree. The first is they don't engage. So they either don't engage in class time, like they don't turn up to class, they don't turn up to lectures, or they don't engage in discussions when they're in class and lectures, and they don't engage with the literature. And we talked about the importance of engaging with literature that can result in critical analysis that you need. So they don't engage. They start things late, like we said. They leave assignments to the end, or they leave exams to the end, or they just they don't really start their reading until week 5, week 6, week 7, and that's just not helpful for anybody. So what my second point for that is students fail because they start things late. My third point is that they see their learning journey as just reviewing what other people have said in the past about psychology. And that kind of is tied up in the engagement argument. So students fail when they just walk into exams or they just walk into assignments and write down what other people have said. They fail that. So even if you've got the most comprehensive reference list, even if you've got those 120 references for that 5,000 word report, even if you've got all the theories listed down, if you've not shown that you've actually engaged with that stuff, and lecturers and tutors and markers can tell that, and you've not critically analyze those references and what they're saying and the theories and all of that kind of stuff, if you've not shown that and you're just reviewing what other people say, you're going to fail it. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it can take a lot of work to just review what other people say. It's not like that's a last minute thing. People put in weeks of work and just end up with talking about what other people have talked about. You can't do that. So they fail because of that. My fourth point is that psychology students walk into these modules thinking they already understand the stuff. So I've had students before like that who, we're doing a behavioral psychology module, and they're like, right, okay, well, I understand, all the stuff that's attributed to behavioral psychology, learning development, these kind of things, language acquisition, all that kind of stuff. They understand it. Social psychology, I get it. Social identity theory, I understand all that. They walk into these modules thinking that they know the stuff, and they don't, because again, it's about critically analysing the material, and it's about going to a deeper level of thinking. So students often fail because they think automatically that they know what they're going to be taught, and they don't. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. This week we've been taking a look at what I learned about what makes psychology students successful in their degrees from my time as a psychology lecturer, tutor and marker. I hope you found this video helpful. As always on GetPsyched, we often do videos for psychology students. A lot of our content is about mental health and psychology, but we do our videos for psychology students as well. So if you're a psychology student, I hope you have found this helpful. If you have, make sure to like the video. You can comment and ask questions and I'll get back to you. And you can also share it with your friends. And if you've been enjoying GetPsyched as a whole, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can hit the little bell next to the subscribe button and you get weekly reminders every time I upload. Thanks again for watching guys, and hopefully catch you next week.